Welcome back to Dash Explore. In today's video, we are going to be sharing our tips and tricks for riding on the train with your children. So if you've never traveled by train before, let me just tell you, train travel is awesome. So I had actually never ridden on a train until 2019 when we went to Italy, and we took the train all over Italy, exploring all of the different towns. And that's when I realized that train travel is so easy and so much more convenient than traveling by car. And it wasn't until we went back to Europe this past December that I realized how easy and convenient trains are, especially for travel with your kids. Now, a few weeks ago, we took the train up to New York City, and that was my first time experiencing train travel in America. And turns out it's just as amazing here. So in today's video, I'm gonna be sharing why we think train travel is so amazing, especially with your family, and I'll be sharing some tips and tricks to make sure your whole travel day goes smoothly. So let's start off with why should you travel by train? Traveling by train with your kids is hands down the best. You have the freedom to get up and move around, being able to stretch your legs, especially with small kids, being able to walk up and down the train, go explore all the different parts of the train. It is just so much more interesting and so much more spacious than any other form of travel. Another reason that we love traveling by train is that you don't have to stop your travel day to go to the bathroom or to get food. The train just keeps moving, and you can walk to the bathroom in your car, or you can go to the cafe car to get something to eat, or bring your own snacks and food. It is just so much more convenient in all the ways, and it leaves you free to interact with your kids while you travel instead of being behind the wheel. Another convenient part about traveling by train is you don't have to really worry about traffic, especially like we went from Richmond, Virginia up to New York City, and to drive there you have to go through Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C., which can be a total nightmare. You'd also have to go through Philadelphia, and just getting into New York City is a mess, but with the train you just travel right through. So if traffic and that stuff is something that really gives you a lot of stress, traveling by train is such an easy method. Now, our train system here in America is not quite as advanced or developed as it is in Europe, but you can still, for the most part, get to a lot of places if you live close enough to a major city. And the final reason we love traveling by train, especially if you're traveling to a major city like New York, is that you don't have to worry about your car or parking or city traffic or any of those things while you're on your trip. So overall, we just have loved traveling by train in the last couple of months, and we are hoping to do a lot more travel by train into the future. Now, enough about why we love trains. Let's get into our tips and tricks for traveling on the train with your kids. My tip number one is be prepared for motion sickness. Now, again, if you've been following along on our channel, I've talked about road trips, I've talked about our Europe train travel experience. We have a motion sickness problem in our family. So I wasn't really thinking about it with the trains when we were in Europe, but luckily I happened to have some gallon Ziploc bags, and that saved our lives as far as mess and all of that. And so I was 100% packing my Ziploc bags for this trip. But something else we tried for this trip, since Haley's almost 5, is we tried Dramamine for kids. We gave her just a half dose to see if that would help with the motion sickness on the train, and we had no issues. Now, the thing with Dramamine or any sort of motion sickness medication is that you should reach out to your doctor and make sure that it is safe for your child to take, and also make sure you read the directions on the package before you give it to your child so that you're giving it within enough time of your train trip and to keep them from getting sick ahead of time. There are a lot of other motion sickness remedies that I'm sure we will be testing out in the future, but we tried out Dramamine. It worked really, really well for us. She was able to play on her tablet and look down and not just be sitting facing forward, and I think it's definitely something we are going to keep in mind for future travel. So if you have not gone on a long car ride or train ride or plane ride with your kids before, it's probably better to be prepared than not have anything at all, and you want to probably go ahead and pack some Ziploc bags, big gallon ones that will zip and contain all of the mess after being sick, because there is nothing worse than being stuck in a moving vehicle with a child who is feeling really sick. And one more thing to add is we also packed some gin candies, and they're like little ginger candies. I ate them all the time when I was pregnant because they really helped with my nausea in my first trimester, and we packed some to give to Haley just in case that might help her with her motion sickness. I've also used them on plane travel and in car rides when I used to get motion sickness. I've kind of phased out of that somehow, and we didn't end up giving them to her, but that is an alternative you can try if you're looking for some other motion sickness remedies. And something else that's really important for motion sickness is to try to ensure that you are facing forward. Now, it might be kind of hard to tell which direction your train is going to pull out and which way the cars are going to face forward, but if you have a kid that's prone to motion sickness, do your best to find a seat where they're facing forward. This can be really tough, especially for us. Like when we left from New York City to come back home, New York City is a huge hub for people, so our train was pretty full, and we actually had to ask some people to move because they have sections that are reserved for parties of 3 or more for families, and there was just like one individual person sitting in this quadrant of seats that have seats facing both ways. We had to be those parents and put our foot down and say, we need our child to face forward. This is for families and there's no other places for us to sit. So we were able to get a place to face forward, but it can make a huge difference. And I know personally when we were in Europe and we were doing our longest train travel of the whole trip and we were on the train for 3 hours and we were facing backwards for the whole 3 hours. And that's really when we experienced our worst motion sickness on the train. And from now on, I will do my best to get there early, to find where we need to be on the train so that we can face forward, because that can make a huge difference of whether or not your child's gonna get motion sickness. So our next tip and trick for train travel is entertainment. Again, I talked about this on our road trip. You always wanna have something to keep your kid entertained. Now it's one thing if you're just taking a short train ride, maybe an hour or less, you can probably easily walk around the train, look out the window, have conversations with your kids. But we were on the train for between 6 and 7 hours. We actually ended up getting delayed coming home. It might have even been closer to 8. It was a really long travel day, so you want to make sure you're prepared with activities for your kids. For this trip, we ended up bringing Haley's tablet, which we were kind of hesitant about, again, with the motion sickness, but she ended up feeling okay with the Dramamine, so she was able to play on that. We also packed her Tony box for this trip. Again, we've mentioned before, we love the Tony box. It is a great screen-free activity for kids. It is kind of bulky, and I knew that we were only going for a weekend, so we weren't gonna have a ton of stuff to bring. So we ended up packing the Tony box this time, and it's a great way to keep your kids entertained, especially if you get a nice collection of Tonys. I also ended up bringing a plain pad of paper and some colored pencils so that she could color with, and that also ended up being a lot of fun. We got to practice her writing skills. We ended up making like a countdown for how many hours it would take, and we would color in a different petal on the flower every hour that the trip went by, and so that kind of helped keep her engaged in the trip as well as helped the time pass. So know your child, know what's going to entertain them, whether you want to get something new for the trip or bring back some old toys that you haven't seen in a while. Just make sure you pack something to keep them entertained. And it's better to be prepared with some extra activities so that they don't get bored and risk meltdowns on your long trip. My next tip for train travel with kids is trains are awesome. Explore the train. If you're going to be stuck on this moving vehicle for hours and hours and hours, walk around, walk through all the different cars. There's first class, there's the coach class, there's the cafe car. Walk your kids around, have them see the different parts of the train, maybe even try to get to the train station early so that you can see the trains as they pull in and just make the most of that experience. For the most part, most people in America travel by car every day. That trains might not be something your kids experience very often. So really lean into that cool experience of riding on a train and all the conductor and the people that work on the train. Just really try to point out all of those things so that they can get excited and maybe learn something on your trip. My next tip is snacks. And similarly to riding in the car, you want to make sure you bring a wide variety of snacks for your kids. You know that they get hungry, and again, if you're going on a really long trip, you want to have something to sustain them throughout the day. You also want to make sure that you and any other grown-up in your group has snacks too, because everybody gets hungry. So make sure you pack some snacks. But worst case scenario, most trains do have cafe cars and you can go and get food, drinks, snacks, whatever you want. I was actually really surprised by the menu options, and I was just so busy leading up to our trip, I didn't even look to see if a cafe car was even an option. So I packed sandwiches and snacks and I had all this stuff. And then we get on the train and they have this giant menu. They had coffee, they had waters and sodas, alcoholic beverages for the adults. They had snacks like chips and granola bars and all those things, as well as sandwiches and mac and cheese. And just way more of an extensive menu than I was expecting. So double check that whatever train you're gonna be riding on has one. I've only ridden this one train in America, so I don't know if every train has one, but that is something to keep in mind if you are traveling by train. So I think that about wraps it up for all the tips I have for this video, but there is something I do want to mention just to mentally plan for your travel purposes. There are rules and regulations about what type of engine the train can use in certain parts of the country. And I know for us, we were riding on a diesel engine from the Richmond portion of our trip up into Washington, DC. And then on both legs of our trip, I think we were delayed by at least an hour going up, and I think it was close to 2 hours on the way home, where they have to swap the engines out. So you stay on the train, which is really nice. You don't have to unload your stuff and get on a different train, but they swap the engines out on this train, and that can cause delays in your trips. So for planning purposes, if you're trying to get to wherever you're going at a certain time, make sure you check and see if that's something your train is going to have to do at all, and kind of prepare that it might cause some delays. And it's also important to keep in mind that when they are swapping that engine, they cut all the power to the train. So it usually only ends up being like 15-ish minutes for them to do the full swap. It wasn't super long while the actual engine was being swapped out, but We were on the train in July and it was 99 degrees outside, so it gets really warm on the train and it's not like there's much relief to step off the train. So just be prepared that if you are going to be on a train that is switching engines, that you're gonna lose power for a little bit. So if you are planning a train travel trip with your family, I hope that this video helps get you excited and also helps you feel more prepared as you head into your vacation. So we hope that you found this video helpful, and if you did, if you could give this video a like, we would really appreciate you. Or if you have any other tips or thoughts or questions about travel by train, please leave them in the comments below. I'm happy to share any more information about our experiences with train travel, and I'm also willing to learn more about train travel because, like I said, I am obsessed and I'm already starting to look into other options of where we could travel by train in the future. So if you're enjoying all of our travel content and you want to stay tuned for more, please make sure you hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so that you can get notified when we post new videos. You can also head over to Instagram and follow us at @Explore. And we hope that you will stick around because next week we will be sharing our tips and tricks for traveling in New York City with your children. So if that's something that interests you for the future or the far off future, we hope that you'll stick around and tune in, and we will catch you in the next one.